Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Radharani Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Rama Rama Jaya Kunja Hari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayat Nasta Prayasta Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. And by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, the Canto 2, the Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 9, Lord Brahma's talks with Krishna, text 45. Narada Prahamunaye Sarasvatyas Tate Nripa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasayamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase
Narada Prahamunaye
Narada Prahamunaye
Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasayamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase
Narada Prahamunaye
Narada Prahamunaye
Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase
Narada Prahamunaye Saraswati Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasayamita Tejase Narada
Prahamunaye
Saraswatyastate Nrpa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasayamita Tejase
Narada Prahamunaye
Narada Prahamunaye
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasayamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase Narada Prahamunaye
Narada Prahamunaye
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasayamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase Narada Prahamunaye Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasayamita Tejase
Narada Prahamunaye
Narada Prahamunaye
Saraswatyastate Nrpa
Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Dhyayate Brahma Paramam
Vyasayamita Tejase
Vyasayamita Tejase Narada Prahamunaye Saraswatyas Tate Nrpa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasayamita Tejase Narada, the great sage Narad,
The great sage Narada
Praha,
Praha
instructed
instructed
Muniye
Munaye
unto the great sage
unto the great sage
Saraswatyaha
Saraswatyaya
of the river Saraswati,
of the river Saraswati
Tate, on the bank, Nripa,
Nirpa,
O king,
O king,
Dhyayate
Dhyayate
unto the meditative,
unto the meditative
Brahma,
Brahma,
absolute truth,
absolute truth,
Paramam,
Paramam,
the supreme,
supreme,
Vyasaya
Vyasaya,
unto Srila Vyasadeva,
unto Srila Vyasa,
Amita,
Amita
unlimited,
unlimited,
Tejas,
Tejas,
unto the powerful.
unto the powerful.
Everyone could come forward a little bit. I thought I took a shower this morning. In succession, O king, the great sage Narad instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, on the bank of the river Saraswati. Purport. In the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad instructed the great sage Vyasadeva as follows. Okay, I hope I don't mess up this meter. Ato mahabhaga bhavana mogadrik Shuchi Shrava Satya Rato Drita Vrita Urukramasya Kilabanda Muktaye Samadhina Nusmarat Tadvicheshtitam. I don't know this verse, so I don't know how that goes, but the translation, and this is 1:513. O greatly fortunate, pious philosopher, your name and fame are universal, and you are fixed in the absolute truth, with spotless character and infallible vision. I ask you to meditate upon the activities of the personality of Godhead, whose activities are unparalleled. So, in the disciplic succession of the Brahma Sampradaya, the practice of yoga meditation is not neglected, but because the devotees are bhakti yogis, they do not undertake the trouble to meditate upon the impersonal Brahman as indicated here. They meditate on Brahma Paramam, or the Supreme Brahman. Brahman realization begins from the impersonal effulgence, but by further progress of such meditation, manifestation of the Supreme Soul, Paramatma realization takes place, and progressing further, realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is fixed. Sri Narad Muni, as the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, knew very well the position of Vyasadeva, and thus he certified the qualities of Srila Vyasadeva as fixed in the absolute truth, with a great vow, etc. Narada advised meditation upon the transcendental activities of the Lord. Impersonal Brahman has no activities, but the personality of Godhead has many activities, and all such activities are transcendental, without any tinge of material quality. If the activities of the Supreme Brahman were material activities, then Narada would not have advised Vyasadeva to meditate upon them, and the Param Brahma is Lord Sri Krishna, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, in 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna realized the factual position of Lord Krishna, he addressed Lord Krishna in the following words: Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam Majam Vibhum, Ahustvam Rishaya Sarve, Devarshir Naradas Tuta, Asito Devalo Vyasaha, Syayam Chaiva Bravishime. Arjuna summarized the purpose of Bhagavad Gita by his realization of Lord Sri Krishna and thus said, My dear personality of Godhead, you are the supreme absolute truth, the original person in the eternal form of bliss and knowledge. And this is confirmed by Narad, Asita, Devala, and Vyas, and above all, your personal self has also confirmed it. When Vyasadeva fixed his mind in meditation, he did it in Bhakti Yoga trance, and actually saw the Supreme Person with Maya, the illusory energy, in contra position. As we have discussed before, the Lord's Maya, or illusion, is also a representation, because Maya has no existence without the Lord. Darkness is not independent of light. Without light, no one can experience the contraposition of darkness. However, this Maya, or illusion, cannot overcome the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but stands apart from him, apashrayam. Therefore, perfection of meditation is realization of the personality of Godhead along with his transcendental activities. Meditation on the personal Brahman is troublesome business for the meditator, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Klesho dikaras tesham avayakta sakta chetasam. Om ajnana timrarandasya kananjana shalakaya chakshur militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupad Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guran Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sagana Ragnaptam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagadpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vachat Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukum Kroti Vachalam Pungam Mungai Giram Yad Kripatam Ham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Senior devotees, please, I request blessings to be able to speak in front of you, and junior devotees, please listen. So today we're going to talk about meditation and devotional service. This verse, Narada Praha Muniye Saraswatyas Tate Nirpa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasa Mita Tejase. The great sage Narad instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, on the bank of the river Saraswati. The first thing that came to my mind is talking about the bank of the river Saraswati. And if you read in the Krishna book, chapter 34, the liberation of Vidyadhara, how the story is set up is that all Nanda Maharaj and all the cowherd men, they once upon a time decided they wanted to celebrate Shiva Ratri, which is, Prabhupada says that the Vaishnavas, we respect Lord Shiva, Vaishnavam Yata Shambhu, he's the greatest Vaishnav. And, but they don't always observe Shiva Ratri, but sometimes they do. And so on this occasion, they wanted to observe it, and so they went to Ambikavan, which is apparently a place in the Gujarat province, said to be situated on the river Saraswati. Now in the Krishna book, Prabhupada says, like he mentions that the authorities say that it's said to be on the river Saraswati, but then he admits that in that time that no one has found a river Saraswati in the Gujarat province, and then he gives a kind of thing. There's a river called the Sarvamati, but actually the one thing about the point that I'll try to be making is that in meditation, in perfect meditation, actually the senses become completely flawless, and you're actually able to perceive the truth. So actually the words of the authorities were later proven to be true when due to the so-called progress of the modern sciences, they had satellite imagery that was able to detect a dried up riverbed right in the Gujarat province going through Ambikavan, and making those words true, which and from another point it also substantiates the Bhagavatam. Some scholars tried to say that the Bhagavatam was written 1,000 or 1,500 years ago or something like that, or even or even sooner. And whereas the authorities of the Bhagavatam, like Vyasadeva and Prabhupada, they're saying no, this is 5,000 years ago. And so when based on the scientists' estimations, that river Saraswati bed has dried up more than 2,000 years ago. So it kind of shows that the Bhagavatam itself is giving geography in there, according to what no one knew until recently, that there was a river in the Ambikavan province, in the Gujarat province in Ambikavan. But Vyasadeva was told about it. He told about it back then. So it's kind of, in other words, it gives another data point to show that actually the Bhagavatam is 5,000 years old. It's not 1,500 years old or whatever the modern so-called scholars think. And this verse that in the purport Prabhupada starts quoting, Ato Mahabhaga Bhavana Mogadrik Shuchi Shava Satya Rato Drita Vrita. That's in the 5th chapter when Narada Muni is about, Vyasadeva is despondent because he tried to do his best to help everyone. He saw this Kali Yuga was coming, people's memories were gone, so he was going to give them all these paths to be able to purify themselves and attain dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And he laid it all out, and he was frustrated because it didn't seem like it was going to work. And so Narada Muni told them the missing element, the fifth, the fifth goal of life, the real ultimate goal of life, which was prema, in relation to devotional service in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so in part of that, in that section, he's telling him in this verse, O Vyasadeva, your vision is completely perfect. Your good fame is spotless. You are firm in vow and situated in truthfulness. And thus you can think of the pastimes of the Lord in trance for the liberation of the people in general from all material bondage. So when Krishna has his pastimes in the material world, it's so he can broadcast them to all the, the residents of the material world, and then later through the parampara that can actually happen. And so therefore, when people hear these, they can get completely purified. And some cool things in the purport that Prabhupada is writing about in that 5th chapter of the 1st canto is how when the pure devotee who is matured is meditating on the Lord, there's an unlimited stream of transcendental news. There's someone asking Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, because he had a few papers running. Some were weekly, some were monthly, some were, different, and there's many ones all around India he had going. And so they're asking him, how is it that, there's just a few granthas, bhakti granthas, and the Gita, how is it that you can be writing a weekly news thing, or a monthly news thing? Doesn't it'll get old, it'll dry up? He's like, he just looked at the guy, he's like, okay, so there's one little province, and there's one little town, Delhi. How many newspapers does Delhi have? 13 or 14, and they're daily newspapers. And so in the spiritual world is actually 3/4 of the whole creation. And so there's actually, you could get an unlimited, daily up to the minute, news of what's happening in the spiritual world. But, people they just don't want to focus on that. But there's actually an unlimited amount of, transcendental new things. I mean, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya he just heard the Bhagavad, or he just saw the Bhagavad Gita in his meditation. He's a disciple of Vyasadeva, and he's another one that shows an example of this perfect meditation and how you gain knowledge. And he just saw it, and he says, I'm feeling a thrill at every moment. I'm continuously remembering this conversation, and it's becoming increasingly new and new. Because it's transcendental, like Krishna's Nova Yovanam, he's, even though at the end of the Bhagavatam, he is over 100 years old, but he still looks, in the Bhagavad Gita, he's over 100 years old, but he still looks like a fresh youth. So similarly, the Bhagavatam and the Vedas are the sound manifestation of Krishna, and they're similarly ever fresh if approached in the proper way. And in this verse, it's saying Vyasadev's vision is completely perfect in his meditation. So maybe we can go through this. Do we know? Can we call it one by one different defects of acquiring knowledge? People know those, the 4 defects. You're trying to acquire knowledge, Chaitanya. What is something that could make you mess up?
Imperfect senses.
Yeah, karana patava, imperfect. Okay, cheating propensity, vipralipsa. Hari.
Forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness and mistakes. That's the same thing, pramada, and then, or I guess, to be an illusion is pramada. That means you could be listening, people, and the proof of that is you're in a classroom and the teacher's giving all the answers during the lecture, and then they give the test, but people still get the answers wrong on the test. Even though all the answers were there, they couldn't memorize it, or they couldn't hear it properly. And then you could be just completely an illusion or making mistakes. So yeah, imperfect senses, being an illusion, cheating propensity, the scientists, if their job is on the line, if their tenure is on the line and they have to publish a paper, then they're not so much obligated to the truth. So they'll easily fudge some numbers, do it if they have a client that wants a specific outcome, because they care more about the money that they get rather than the truth, then that cheating propensity will take over. Or so many people, they control the flow of information to be able to better suit themselves. Like you look at any government propaganda program that they can run to just shape the minds of their constituency so that they can better get an outcome. So it's like kind of like a cheating propensity. But when in devotional service, those four are gone. What I was thinking of, like, how is meditation and devotional service like perfect? And one verse came to mind: Sarvo padi vinir muktam tat parat vena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchate. So when we get rid of these material designations, like I am, so and so from such and such place, and these are my parents, and this is my, this is my work, and this is my whatever. When we get rid of those and actually cut things down to the true nature of ourselves, the soul, and we engage, the senses of that into the master of the senses, then because Krishna has perfect senses, we also need perfect senses to be able to serve him. So in that service, we can have perfect senses. And also, the senses, even though they're defective, in acquiring knowledge passively, they can, in acquiring knowledge actively, the senses are extremely imperfect. Like, if someone knocks on the door, we can't even hear it here. They have to ring a doorbell. And even if they do that, we can't tell who they are until they actually walk in. And even if they walk in with a disguise, then we're even more bewildered to be able to tell who they are. But if someone just calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, I'm at the door. This is me," and I can I see it's a phone number of a person I know, and I'm pretty sure they're telling the truth, then the information can be given perfectly. Or if Prabhupada just comes up to, we could meditate all we want, but if we don't know about Krishna and what he looks like, then we don't have any idea. But Prabhupada can just come up us into the Gita or in the Bhagavatam, and just Krishna is Sham. He's the color of a blue cloud, a dark cloud, and he's wearing a yellow dhoti, and he plays the flute. Like, just him telling us that, we can gain more knowledge than the impersonalist meditating for millions and millions of years and only being able to approach just the tip of the toenail of Krishna's effulgence. But I wanted to ask some of the devotees here, why also is the meditation in devotional service, how can that be perfect? Does anyone have any thoughts? Avoiding offenses, yeah. Yeah, so it says Vyasadev's vision is perfect. So I'm thinking, how is that in devotional service? And one reason I was thinking is, Hrishikena Hrishikesha, Krishna is the master of the senses, and therefore if you engage the senses in the master of the senses, they become purified and used in their proper way, so they can become perfect. And my other thing I was thinking is that the senses can passively accept information perfectly. If perfect information is given to the ears or the eyes in the form of reading something, and it's perfect information, the senses can unless you're blind or completely deaf, you can hear what someone says, and if they're telling you the absolute truth, it's easy to transmit the absolute truth that way. But I was thinking maybe there's other things that I missed. But Prabhupada's talking about how in our Brahma Sampradaya, the practice of yoga meditation is not neglected. And when people think of yoga and meditation, I think I knew this well before I became a devotee, and it just seemed like kind of common knowledge. Everyone knows about Om. Meditation, it just means you sit down and chant Om. Like, if people they might just almost naturally know that. But what they don't really know the full story. Even most people that actually sit down and try to chant Om, and most people think like, from Om actually comes the Gayatri mantra. And most people think that the Gayatri mantra is about the sun. But it's, and it can certainly be interpreted in that way, but that's like a very secondary meaning. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a verse where it's saying, Gayatri arte e granta arambana satyam pera sambandha dimahi sadhane prayojan. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam is the explanation of the Brahma Gayatri, satyam param dimahi. Here, dimahi indicates the execution of devotional service and the attainment of the ultimate goal of life, Sri Krishna, who is satyam. Satyam param, the supreme absolute truth. So here we're getting the knowledge that actually Omkar and its expansion into the Gayatri is, it's not necessarily the sun, although because the sun is an expansion of Krishna and it's one of like a big manifestation of his vibhuti, his potency that we perceive in this world. Meditation on the sun is, is something that some people do, but it's not complete meditation on the Satyam Param, the supreme absolute truth, which is Krishna. He's the source of the sun. And from the acharyas, we can understand that that Omkar was actually the way that it was realized in the Brahma Samhita. We can hear that when Lord Brahma was told to do tapasya, and then he started to meditate and do penance like that. And when he was matured in that, Krishna came to him in his samadhi and started to play his flute. And that flute sound became the syllable Om, then it became the Gayatri mantra, then it became the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, and he was able to fully realize that. And from that realization, we get the Bhagavatam as well as the Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Vriksha. So he's seeing the whole realm made of Chintamani, which it's full of Kalpa Vrikshas, desire trees. So Chintamani is like a desire to, whatever's in your Chinta, whatever in your consciousness, the Chintamani can manifest. And the Kalpa Vriksha, also whatever you want, it can immediately manifest. And Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Vriksha Laksha Vartesha Surabir. So there's hundreds of thousands of Surabri cows. Surabri cows can give you whatever you want. Laksha Vartesha Surabir Abhipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasha. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, can give you whatever you want. And there's tons and tons, millions and millions of Lakshmis there. And they're all Lakshmi Sahasra Satam Sem Brahma Sevyamanam. They're all serving Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. There's other verse we have back here. That was like this verse. You guys can turn around and see these two nice pictures of Radha Govinda with the appropriate verses. Alola Chandraka Lasadva Namalya Vamsi. And then Lord Brahma saw Krishna with his Alola, with some sort of necklace, with some sort of moon ornament, with a Vanamalya Vamsi, with a Vanamala, a forest garland of nice flowers, and his Vamsi, his flute, Ratnangadam, his angas were filled with ratnas, with gems all over his different limbs. He was enjoying many wonderful pastimes, and with his beautiful cloud complexioned form, standing in threefold fending form, Shamam Tribangam Lalitam Niyata Prakasham, Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So Lord Brahma was seeing all this come out of the flute of Krishna. So that's actually what meditation is, and what the Gayatri in the Omkar is Krishna. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, and it starts with hearing and chanting, and that hearing and chanting, because it's coming from the transcendental plane, it purifies everything on the material plane. Sarvapadi Vinir Muktam. All the upadis, all the designations that we have when we actually start to chant and hear and engage in the process of devotional service, which actually the whole process of devotional service is just leading into deeper and deeper meditation. Like whatever we do is just based on our consciousness. So if we're engaged in devotional service, our consciousness is continuously being purified and continuously being refined until it's thinking more and more deeply about Krishna and our relationship to him. Then it gets to a point called samadhi, which is continuous, absorption in that. And in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking all about samadhi, like how to attain samadhi, but he's not making it completely open in terms of meditation on him. And until the last verse, he admits that the bhakti yogi is the topmost yogi, the topmost meditation, and the topmost samadhi. But he does talk about it. And when the person actually reaches samadhi, it says, and this is in verse 20 to 23, and actually in some Perfection of Yoga is a small book that's actually the summary of chapter 6. And on the back of there, it's quoting these 3 verses, and it shows a picture of Prabhupada, like, just sitting. And Prabhupada is an example of someone who was continuously actually in samadhi. Although maybe if you had a misconception about what samadhi is, you might not realize it because it seemed like he was always doing something, writing books or, chastising his disciples or giving a lecture or, managing a worldwide movement, writing letters, so many different things, sleeping or taking prasadam. In the stage of perfection called samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This, indeed, is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So, the mind is completely restrained from material mental activities, and one is never shaken even in the greatest difficulties. We can see this obviously in Prabhupada's life, that his mind was always thinking how to preach, how to write books, how to actually fulfill the order of my spiritual master. That was his samadhi, that was his meditation. And that meditation, it seems like he's found the secret, because everyone's trying to find the secret to be completely, unaffected by material miseries and great calamities. Although, all around the world we just see is failures at that. Like let's say you become the richest man in the world, Bill Gates, but now his wife is divorcing him, and now he's got to offload a lot of his stock options, and that great wealth is going to get cut and whatever. And I don't know how these really rich people have good or bad relations, but his relation with his wife is completely ruined. But this is what everyone's looking for, and Prabhupada definitely had it. You look at Prabhupada coming from India. Well, in India you could see that he had it. He struggled very difficult ways after his family left him. There's actually a story where someone found him. He was just sleeping in a cave with a small, really thin cloth that was not enough. And they were saying the person was tried to arrange for him to get a better sleeping condition, and tried to arrange for him to get he's like, why don't you have a better blanket? And he's like, well, because then I wouldn't have enough money to buy paper, and I wouldn't have enough resources to be able to print my magazine and distribute it, or print my books and distribute it. Because he was so fixed on the order of his spiritual master, he was willingly taking very humble and haggard conditions. What to speak of the heart attacks on the way over here, and all the struggles throughout, the 12 years that he manifested ISKCON. So many different struggles in the beginning, dealing with Mayavadis and no one listening to what he was trying to say. Then when people were trying to start listening to it, they had to say they're freaking hippies that were engaged in so many nonsense things. But he pulled them out of the muck and dusted them off and made them into a powerful movement, a force to be reckoned with. It was just based on one fact, his dedication and wanting to serve the order of his spiritual master. And so in that, Prabhupada says in the purport that you first get detachment from material enjoyments and concepts. So this is, well, if we apply this to ourselves, we should expect these things to happen, that the signs of advancement are that we're losing taste for material enjoyment, for material concepts, like identifying ourselves as the son of so-and-so or the daughter of so-and-so, or this is the need for like a big reputation, or all these should go down, the attraction to the senses. And then there's also realization of transcendental pleasure through the transcendental mind and senses. And in the beginning, I guess, as long as we're taking prasadam, that's one of the main sources of transcendental pleasure for the devotees, or even hearing the Bhagavatam, hearing kirtan and katha, glorifying the Lord, and realizing our connection with the Lord is getting stronger is a source of great satisfaction. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport also that the actual yogi, that if a pure devotee is actually in pure samadhi, then they can't be shaken. They won't be attracted by sex allurement, as we see in the case of Haridas Thakur. They won't be misled by yogic powers. Like you can get so many very amazing yogic powers, but Prabhupada says if yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they can never attain perfection. Like, the yoga process is actually so wonderful, and it's able to give us something so amazing and incredible. But if we're attracted by just the byproducts, like when the ocean of milk is being churned, the demigods were warned, don't be attached to anything that comes out. Just let the demons take whatever they want to take. You have to wait for the nectar. That's what you want. So similarly, the process of yoga, it can give us the ultimate nectar. It can reestablish our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where we have a similar body to be able to, and mind and senses, to be able to actually engage into service with the Lord, with all His perfect and pure devotees as our association. But if we're attracted by the byproducts of that, because Bhakti Yoga is the highest yoga, it can give easily all the things of the lower yoga, from yogic powers to liberation. It can give sense pleasures easily, heavenly sense pleasures. But we shouldn't be distracted by those things. And also, Bhakti Yoga is the most practical yoga. The senses are naturally restrained, and when we're doing things purely and favorably for devotional service, the senses are given the bare minimum necessary. The senses are given their quota, what they need, and transcendental pleasure is there. The devotee, Prabhupada says in the purport, the devotees are callous to accidents and different unfortunate things that happen, but extremely alert to their duties. So Bhakti Yoga is the most practical form of meditation, and it starts with hearing and chanting. This purifies one more and more, and naturally we're led to the highest meditation, the mind fixed on the Supreme Absolute Truth, Param Satyam Dhimahi, Radha and Krishna, Radha Govinda, and actually Prabhupada said, when he heard about people working so hard, distributing books in cold places during the winter marathon, but because there was like a good opportunity to do it, they were just pushing through to try to serve the order of their spiritual master. They also achieved that kind of a state of samadhi. Prabhupada admits, this is samadhi. matra sparshas tu kontya sitoshna sukha dukkha gamayo payano nishas tams tikshas vabharata. When one is actually progressing in devotional service, they'll find that they can tolerate these different dualities of happiness and distress, heat and cold, which that's like he said, this is samadhi, distributing books, because then if you're distributing books or engaging in Sankirtan, you're following the order of Prabhupada, which he's following the order of his spiritual master, and it's like a perfected desire that's just been handed down generation after generation. And all we do is just have to grab onto it and make our desire, one with that of the spiritual master, and we can start to attain these things and experience this. So, Narada Prahamunaye Saraswatyastate Nripa Dhyayate Brahma Paramam Vyasayamita Tejase. The great sage Narada instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the illimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, on the bank of the river Saraswati. So after Narada Muni learned, he questioned Lord Brahma about the Bhagavatam, they were given the 4 seed verses, and then after realizing that, he could instruct it to Srila Vyasadeva. And then through the parampara, we're all somehow sitting here and hearing that, the fruit of that, which is actually more sweet because it's been handed down, and the 4 verses which we couldn't understand has been mercifully increased by Vyasadeva to 18,000, and that's been mercifully increased by Prabhupada to 18,000 verses plus purports, which is essentially like, maybe 10 or 20 verses per each other verse. So what is that? 18,000, probably now close to 100,000 or 200,000 or something like that. Now it's 8:47. We can open for comments and disagreements and questions. Senior devotees first. Krishna Kripa, anything?
You're asking about meditation. There's one verse that she talks about, he explains meditation.
That's in the 6th chapter, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Mind is by nature set up to wander off different items of sense gratification. Meditator has to bring it back, and yesterday was just completely destroyed his mind with Krishna and Krishna's energies.
Mm.
Of course, that's one of the meditation is smaller than one of the 9 items of devotion service.
Mm.
Large, attain perfection, something like that. Smaller. So it's very powerful, completely absorbable mind. Krishna, seeing everything in relationship with Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, basically Krishna is describing everything in reality in relationship to himself. If you could see the world through the eyes of Bhagavad Gita, won't be meditating on Krishna.
Yeah. And for us, we should think if we ever have any, mishaps or missed time, that this is like an interruption in our meditation on the order of the spiritual master, and that's like the keystone. If we can remain fixed on that, then it can help draw our mind back to our service and back to the proper consciousness to do things so we can continue to make progress. That's a good one. Ramrai Prabhu, you have anything to say?
Simple that it's
reminds me of the Sahajas, when they so-called meditate on Krishna, they say, that, oh, I just see Krishna, but they don't see Maya. So Bhaktisiddhanta in this Prakrita Rasa Shuta Dushani, or I think that's the name of it, his 100 verses against Prakrita Sahajas, he makes that comment that in your meditation you see Krishna and Maya side by side, not separate, something like that. Prabhuji? Yeah, there's so much information in the Bhagavatam that if you come at it with the wrong attitude, it's just gonna go in one ear and out the other, and it's not gonna do anything. But if you actually can approach it in the right attitude, everything is revealed there. Such amazing things that no one would ever be able to figure out in trillions of years. Okay, Dylan, you've been waiting patiently.
Why would you say, in your words, why people in the West are so attached to this impersonal form of meditation and yoga, and how can we explain what real yoga is to them? For example, in distribution to somebody who has no idea of what real yoga is.
For one, it's a kind of like the impersonal view is the, there's that famous verse where 1-11 Vedanti tattva vidas tattvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmati paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. So the absolute truth is revealed according to how it's approached, and the easiest and natural first way that people approach the absolute truth, and even like mundane scientists and logicians, if science is actually stretched, the limit of science and logic, it can begin to approach this impersonal Brahman realization. And so it's in one sense it's a little bit natural for people to maybe reach some sort of conclusion about that, or at least it's easy. It's a little easy to understand. It's kind of simple. If you take everything away, and one reason people are like so attached to it also is that Shankaracharya came specifically to finagle out this philosophy and give it to people. One problem with the philosophy, though, is that you need to be able to control your senses. Although, at the end of this purport of our verse, Prabhupada mentions the 12.5 in the Gita, where Krishna is explaining how actually the impersonal meditation is very difficult. If you're not your mind and you're not your body, and even your Atma, your soul, the essence of yourself is something not real, then how are you supposed to use the self to dispose of the self? How are you supposed to meditate yourself out of existence? That's essentially what impersonal Brahman realization is that you and of yourself are nothing. There's just the Brahman. That's all that there is. And so if someone's attached to like trying to realize that, like if they try, because what they might say is like, oh, you want me to worship God? But I am God. And then you have to let them explain it a little bit, because actually they don't mean that they're God. If they're actually coming from this philosophy, they mean that God is a part of Brahman that somehow got into some sort of illusion, and we're also some sort of Brahman, and both are Brahman. So he's not actually God, he's another just illusion of Brahman, but both are actually Brahman. So you mean you're actually Brahman. And then from there you can explain to them how, look, the Bhagavad Gita is telling us how hard it is actually to meditate on the Brahman. What's the use of being God if you can't even remember what you ate last week for breakfast or something like that. And the good thing for us is that Bhakti Yoga is also extremely natural. Everyone wants to render some service. Everyone is rendering some service, no matter what position they're in. Even if they're like the dictator of some thing where they've are supposedly in control of the whole population, they're still probably under control of their family or from someone else. At that point, people are going to want to try to kill them and stuff like that. Or like a king, he's under control of the queen, or the master of the house is under the control of his boss. The boss is under control of his desire for money, and like that. Everyone is trying to serve something, and so according to Bhakti Yoga, it's just natural. Why do you want to just try to serve the best thing? Serve Krishna. So the way to defeat people is you show them the kind of logical inconsistencies, and that if they try to tell themselves that they're God, or that they're Brahman, and that their self isn't real, you just explain to them, your self isn't real, so then what's the point? How are you supposed to use yourself to get rid of yourself? It doesn't make any sense. And so Prabhupada says in the purport, you're supposed to use non-existing. I have to actually read the purport directly, because the wording shows how ridiculous the actual thing is. It's very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he's not the body. There's no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly through Bhakti Yoga. You just chant Krishna's name, you take prasadam. All those things are making a step directly towards the absolute truth. But for those who are trying to follow the impersonal way, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme, and they have to understand non-perceptual feelings. What is that? This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the spiritual master, simply by offering regular obeisances to the deity, he doesn't come and bow down toward Radha Govinda. Just sit down in the kirtan, take a cookie, read Bhagavad Gita. It's easy that anyone can do. Maybe not everyone can do every part of it, of Bhakti Yoga. Not everyone can go on the altar and dress Radha Govinda, but everyone can even a blind, deaf, and dumb person can somewhat engage in some sort of devotional service. It's there for everyone, but in the actual process of realizing, the impersonal realization is impossible, which is also why when they actually achieve their realization, when they actually achieve it, they end up, their self actually is maybe it can stay in stasis for some time, but then the self is agitated and it needs to experience something, so it comes back down, and Prabhupada says then they open up all kinds of hospitals and they just want to do good for the whole world, but that's because it has an agitation to have an experience. So why not give it the unlimited experience of Krishna, and then it can go and eternally experience that. That's the alternative, it's a much better alternative. Okay, and that's 9 o'clock. Mahaprasadi Govinde Namo Brahmani Vaishnava. Srimad Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Bhakti Dylan Ki.